Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I recently used to hit rank 1 with on the Arena ladder. As you can see from the screenshot here, I'm currently 19-1 with this list, so it's felt incredibly strong to me so far. Now before I get into it, there's going to be an importable deck list down in the description if you want to try the list out for yourself, and also if you're an MTG Zoom Premium member, I'm going to be posting a full deck guide article about this deck early next week, probably on Monday or Tuesday, that'll have a bunch more details, how I tweak the deck for best of one, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well, so I'll have a link to that down in the description as well once it goes live. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Food Chain Humans deck in Historic. So with the TMNT set release, Food Chain has definitely felt like by far and away the strongest card to me. So the way we're trying to use it in this deck is alongside Guardian Evangel. And the way this works, if you've not seen it before, is if we have Food Chain in play and we cast Guardian Evangel, we conjure a Guardian Evangel into our hand. We can then exile the Guardian Evangel that's on the battlefield to produce 3 mana. Then we spend 2 of that 3 mana to cast the Guardian Evangel that was conjured into our hand, conjuring another one into our hand, and we've already set up a loop here where we're basically producing 1 mana every single time. Then we can also just pump that mana into Guardian Evangel itself, meaning that we, produce infinite mana and then produce infinite 3/1s. Now, obviously, Arena has a 5-minute time limit, meaning that in reality, you're only really going to get 17 or 18 Guardian Evangels down, but that is going to be good enough to win the game in the majority of the time. Additionally, if we have Recruiter of the Guard or Imidane's Recruiter in our hand, once we have a bunch of Evangels in play, we can then use Food Chain, cast Recruiter of the Guard to tutor Imidane's Recruiter, use Food Chain again to cast the Recruiter, and give our whole board of 3/1s +1/+0 and haste to win immediately. And even if we don't have either of these, we can also use the mana off Food Chain to cast Juggernaut Peddler, because the only real ways that you're going to lose with 17 or 18 Evangels in play is either if the opponent has a board sweeper, which we can use Peddler to get rid of, or if the opponent has a way to combo off themselves, which again we can use Peddler to get rid of, meaning we're only really going to lose if the opponent either has 2 board sweepers or 2 ways to combo off, or if we're dead on board in the air, for example, against maybe a deck like Izzet Wizards. But for the most part, we have so many ways to ensure that Evangel is going to win the game. And then additionally, we can do this as early as turn 2, right? If we go with Noble Hierarch or Avacyn's Pilgrim on turn 1, we can then cast Food Chain on turn 2, immediately exile the Mana Dork to produce 2 mana to cast the Guardian Evangel, and then we're off to the races. We can just go off immediately. So being able to win on turn 2 has felt incredibly busted to me so far. Now, before I get into the specifics of the rest of the deck, I want to quickly address a couple of cards that I'm not running, because I imagine I'm going to get a lot of questions about them, namely Primal Prayers and Enlightened Tutor. Now, if we were playing in the pre-BNR Historic, where Eldrazi was dominating and there wasn't really as much interaction, then I do think Primal Prayers or Enlightened Tutor would probably be the best way to build the deck, because I think it's the best proactive way to build it. But in the Historic format right now, it feels like it's way more interactive, right? There's loads of decks running discard spells, there's loads of mid-range variants, whether that's Jund, Dimir, Rakdos, I've seen Mono Black recently as well, and additionally there's a ton of decks running counter spells. Dimir is definitely the most popular one, but I've seen a resurgence of both Azorius and Jeskai control. Merfolk is running counter spells, other blue decks run it in the sideboard as well. So running a deck like Food Chain plus Primal Prayers felt really weak into those interactive decks, because you're relying on resolving a 3 or 4 mana enchantment, which is super difficult to do when the most popular decks are running discard spells and counter spells in very high numbers. And then Enlightened Tutor did feel a little bit better, because there is some more flexibility, right? The idea with that is you can Enlightened Tutor for Food Chain to get it more consistently, but you also do get somewhat of a toolbox as well. I think especially being able to go Enlightened Tutor on turn 1, search Rest in Peace, cast Rest in Peace on turn 2 against Jund is very, very good, because Rest in Peace is so good against Jund. And then you can also go, Enlightened Tutor for Seam Rip if you need to have removal, or, it's a great way to remove ETB hate cards like Hushbringer and Torpor, which is really nice as well. But the big issue I found with Enlightened Tutor was that it's so weak into counter spells, right? Going Enlightened Tutor to draw lock yourself to get Food Chain, then draw Food Chain, and then if the Food Chain gets countered, that's so bad for you. Not to mention, I think Enlightened Tutor is a little bit clunky as well, because it kind of incentivizes you to run more lands, because you can't really afford to Enlightened Tutor for Food Chain if you don't already have your 3rd land drop. So for me, while the format is super interactive, it really didn't feel great to go all in on Food Chain or have redundancy with Primal Prayers, because you're so weak into those interactive decks. So I really wanted to build the rest of the deck in more of a grindy way to ensure that we have a way to beat Dimir and Jund and more interactive decks in the long game, while still having access to the turn 2 wins off Food Chain against other uninteractive decks, which is a big deal. So starting off here at the 1-drop slot, we've got Avacyn's Pilgrim and Noble Hierarch. I guess the first thing to address here is why I'm running Avacyn's Pilgrim over a mana dork like Birds of Paradise, which fixes our mana much better. And the main reason for that is just, if you have a look at the mana base, right, we're running 4 Cavern of Souls, 3 Echoing Cavern, meaning that since Avacyn's Pilgrim is a human, which is the creature type that we're going to be naming every single time off these, we have way more of a chance to cast these on turn 1. Now, we do technically have 14 green sources between Starting Town, Mana Confluence, Prismatic Vista, and Forest as well, but I've had a decent number of starts where I draw, for example, Plains Cavern of Souls as my 2 lands, and just being able to cast Avacyn's Pilgrim off the Cavern of Souls makes a really big difference there. So I think it's worth running more of a human, not to mention we do have some human synergies with stuff like Jarina as well. So for me, being able to cast it more consistently on turn 1 is a really big deal. And the main reason I'm running these mana dorks is to enable the turn 2 kill off Food Chain more consistently, right? Like I said, if we do have one of these plus Food Chain plus Evangel, we can just win on turn 2, which is huge. But as you can see, the curve is reasonably high. We do have good, 3 drops to cast, and Tajik is one of our main backup game plans, especially with Cavern of Souls. And so being able to go Noble Hierarch or Avacyn's Pilgrim on turn 1, into Recruiter on turn 2 to search for Tajik, into Tajik on turn 3 is so good, especially against Dimir if you have Cavern of Souls down as well. So these are not only nice with Food Chain, but they're also good with our other 3 drops and more expensive cards. And additionally, we do have Birthing Ritual as kind of our main backup engine card as well, and being able to go, turn 1 Mana Dork into another Mana Dork into Birthing Ritual, sack 1 and still have a Mana Dork in play has felt really nice as well. So these are really good for speed and also for just, being decent with Birthing Ritual as well. And then Esper Sentinel, in my opinion, is one of the best cards in the format right now, especially while the format is so interactive. There are very, very few top-tier decks that can, afford to ignore this, really. So Esper Sentinel basically either draws you cards in the early game, which is huge in a combo deck like this, where you're really trying to assemble certain pieces, right? Helps you find Food Chain or Sigardian Evangel or Birthing Ritual or Peddler more consistently, which are huge cards to get down in the early game. Or it slows down the opponent's proactive game plan, which, again, plays right into our hands. So it just feels to me right now like Esper Sentinel is a really good place in the format. Again, it's a human, so it synergizes well with Jarina and Cavern of Souls, good to bring back off Extraction Specialist, and obviously in situations where it's not good, we can sacrifice it to Birthing Ritual as well, which is pretty nice. And then Sigardian Evangel, one of the other reasons why I really much prefer this over other alternatives you can run with Food Chain like Squee is that it's way better to run as a 4 of and just works well with our fair backup game plan as well, right? A lot of games I've won, when I don't have Food Chain, just casting multiple Sigardian Evangels, tapping down the opponent's creatures, getting in with my aggressive humans, and then, oftentimes I've gone Sigardian Evangel, use Recruiter to get Imidane's Recruiter, and then just win fairly by casting Imidane's Recruiter and buffing our board and attacking in. So Sigardian Evangel also works very well with our fair game plan, as well as being obviously the main combo enabler alongside Food Chain. Then Birthing Ritual, like I said, I really wanted to have a backup game plan that was capable of outgrinding the interactive decks, and Birthing Ritual has felt so good. If you can resolve this against Dimir before they have a counterspell up, or if they tap out for like a Psychic Frog, for example, it's so difficult for them to beat because Dimir, the color combination just doesn't have good way to beat enchantments, and you have so many, it's just such a good card that will just often solo the game, right? You can sack your Mana Dorks to get Juggernaut Peddlers to get rid of their interaction or top-end threats, using Birthing Ritual into Recruiter of the Guard to get Tajik when you have Cavern of Souls is huge, using it with Extraction Specialist is huge, right? You can go Birthing Ritual, sack Peddler, get Extraction Specialist, get Peddler back, get another Thoughtseize, or, post sideboard against Jund. One of the best lines you can do is use Jarina, exile the opponent's graveyard, sacrifice Jarina to Birthing Ritual, get Extraction Specialist, get Jarina back, exile your graveyard, and then that makes the Goyfs completely shrink down to 0/1s. It cuts them off stuff off Jarsil. It makes them have to rebuild with Croxer and, Detectives Phoenix and Fear of Missing Out. So Birthing Ritual is just such an effective way to grind against these sorts of decks, and is just a decent card, if you are against decks where you have to race, being able to find Peddler off Birthing Ritual is huge. And then, being able to find Recruiter of the Guard to get to Jig is absolutely huge as well. So this single-handedly wins a lot of the grinding matchups, and is very difficult for even decks like Jund to beat unless they have Abrupt Decay, for example. Then Juggernaut Peddler, absolutely huge in this deck because, like I said, I'm not going all in on Food Chain, but there are obviously going to be matchups where you just need to race, and obviously without Enlightened Tutor, without Primal Prez, there are going to be some situations in the mirror match or against other combo decks where the opponent will have a faster start than you, so having access to Juggernaut Peddler to slow the opponent down is absolutely huge. Not to mention, obviously, like I said, Counter Spell is very popular right now, Discard Spell is very popular right now, so being able to use Juggernaut Peddler to preemptively get rid of the opponent's counterspells to then clear the way for Food Chain, Birthing Ritual, Tajik, whatever the case may be, it just felt really good. And then, like I said as well earlier, if you're going off with Evangel, having access to Juggernaut Peddler to get rid of the opponent's board sweeper or way to combo off ensures that the Evangel can then win the following turn. And then in the 3-drop slot, we've got Extraction Specialist. kind of mentioned that it's very good with Birthing Ritual, but it's also very nice with Evangel, right? One of the things that you need to remember with Food Chain is that you really want to have creatures in play the turn you cast Food Chain, ideally, and having access to Extraction Specialist means that we can run out Sigardian Evangel on turn 2 and not have to worry about losing it, because you go Sigardian Evangel on turn 2, then discard one to the graveyard, then on turn 3 you can go Food Chain, exile the Sigardian Evangel, cast Extraction Specialist, bring back the Sigardian Evangel that was discarded, and then you're just good to combo off immediately. So it's really nice with that as well. And then additionally, like I said, the format is just very interactive right now. So if the opponent does kill your Esper Sentinel, your Sigardian Evangel, or your Juggernaut Peddler, being able to cast Extraction Specialist, get it back, get 2 bodies onto the battlefield, 2 for 1 the opponent, is a really good way to grind into the longer games as well. Not to mention, it also gives you a good way to reuse your one-offs, right? If you use Haywire Might or Dauntless Dismantler, which is especially good against Affinity, which is another deck that got a lot of new tools from the TMNT set, you can then use Extraction Specialist to reuse these, even though we're only running them as a one-off, which is pretty nice. Then Recruiter of the Guard is absolutely huge for consistency with Food Chain, right? It basically means that Food Chain plus Sigardian Evangel is not only the only way we have of comboing off, right? If we go Food Chain, we can exile a 2-drop like Juggernaut Peddler, for example, to get Recruiter of the Guard. Then use Recruiter of the Guard to get Sigardian Evangel, exile the Recruiter of the Guard to Food Chain, and then we're just immediately going off as well. So it's huge at finding Evangel for Food Chain in the first place. And then once we're going off with Food Chain and Evangel, we can use it to find Imodrane's Recruiter. If we don't have Food Chain, using it to find Tajik to cast the next turn is absolutely huge. Like I said, Tajik plus Cavern of Souls can just solo the game against Dimir and Jund a lot of the time. And then Imodrane's Recruiter, like I said, basically ensures that we have a way to win off Evangel and Food Chain when we're comboing off. But if we are just on the fair beatdown game plan, this is a really nice way to close the game out, even when we don't have Food Chain as well. And then at the 4-drop slot, mentioned it a few times, but Tajik is just a card that can win the game on its own, especially important against those interactive decks as well. Against the more aggressive decks where we're not trying to grind into the long game, I do cut this, but, you know, like I said, against those interactive decks, having this, especially with Cavern of Souls, if the opponent's reliant on counter spells, is absolutely huge. And then Witch Enchanter is basically a tutorable land or main deck tutorable artifact or enchantment removal that also ensures we have enough land drops, which we're going to talk about next in the mana base. So 23 lands plus the Witch Enchanter, essentially 24 lands, but I do think that is quite important, right? We do have 3 and 4 drops that we want to be able to cast, and even though we do have mana dorks, these do die quite often, especially against decks like Jund and Dimir. So having enough lands to be able to consistently get to turn 3 for Food Chain and Recruiter of the Guard is a pretty big deal. In terms of the lands themselves, I really wanted to ensure that we still had the 4 Prismatic Vista and the 4 basics to go alongside it, to ensure that we're not very weak to cards like Harbinger of the Seas or Magus of the Moon. Having mana dorks also does help there as well, but I did feel like it's kind of awkward because if you're not running a lot of basics plus Prismatic Vista, you're kind of forced into running Dismember in the sideboard, which didn't feel particularly great. So just having these ensures that we don't get soloed by the land hate cards. And then outside of that, we've got Starting Town and Mana Confluence to ensure that we can hit green and white when we need, but they also help to cast red for Tajik and Imodane's Recruiter, and black for Juggernaut Peddler. And then same sort of thing with Cavern of Souls and Echoing Cavern. These really help to ensure that we can cast Peddler and Tajik and Imodane's Recruiter when we need. Cavern of Souls in particular is so big right now. I think one of the big weaknesses of Selesnya builds in particular is that they are very weak to Dimir because of counter spells. So having Cavern plus basically all humans is a really good way to play through that. And then Echoing Cavern, same sort of thing, fixes for Juggernaut Peddler and Imodane's Recruiter and Tajik, but the ability to seek mana is pretty nice. I've had a few games where I have Food Chain in play, plus a few mana dorks, but I don't have either Sigardian Evangel or Recruiter of the Guard, and then we can pump mana from our dorks into the Echoing Cavern, and if we hit Sigardian Evangel or Recruiter of the Guard, we can just immediately go off, which is really nice. But overall, this is just fixing that gives us a good mana sink. And then we also get access to Gigantha as well, which has come up a few games, but, you know, Gigantha is just kind of nice to have here, basically just a free card. So that's the main deck, and like I said, I did test a bunch of builds with Primal Prez and Enlightened Shooter, and while those did feel better proactively in uninteractive matchups, because you can combo off more consistently and more quickly, in the interactive matchups, it just felt so weak having to rely on resolving a 3-mana enchantment into a bunch of discard spells and counter spells. Now, obviously, the downside of switching to a more fair backup plan is in the uninteractive matchups, you are going to be worse off because you can't find your Food Chain as consistently. But for me, the game changer in those sorts of matchups is Juggernaut Peddler, right? If you are in a mirror match, for example, and the opponent is running Food Chain and Primal Prez, having access to Juggernaut Peddler to disrupt that, put them on the back foot, make them have to dig for their combo because their fair game plan isn't as good as yours is absolutely huge. And we can find this very consistently early on, because not only do we have 4 Juggernaut Peddler, but we also have 4 Birthing Ritual, which we can get down, meaning we can get Juggernaut Peddler down very consistently early in the game as well. So for me, this is the main card that enables us to run more of a fair backup game plan without losing too much equity in the uninteractive matchups, if that makes sense. And then moving on to the sideboard, 4 Seam Rip is very important here for not only the fast aggressive decks where you want to have early interaction like auras or wizards to slow the opponent down, but it's also absolutely essential to have in the sideboard to be able to deal with ETB hate cards like Hushbringer or Torpor Orb, for example. Those cards do shut down a huge portion of our deck, so having access to a way to remove those is very important. And I do think, obviously, one of the main reasons I've been able to do so well with this deck right now is the format hasn't had time to adjust. I do think one of the adjustments the format could make in order to account for this deck is to run more ETB hate cards in the sideboard, and so in future it might also be worth running Seam Rip plus Portable Hole or Seam Rip plus Fragment Reality to just give you a higher density of ways to remove them. But right now, whilst it's not as popular, and honestly not too many decks can afford to run ETB hate cards, right? Jund can't because of the Goyfs, Affinity can't because of all the ETB cards that deck runs as well. There's a lot of decks that can't really afford to run it, so I'm not sure how much of an issue that will be, but either way, it's really important to have answers to that to ensure you don't get blown out by those sorts of hate cards. And then we've got a couple of tutor targets for Recruiter of the Guard. We've got Haywire Might here, which is obviously just good to remove any problematic artifacts or enchantments like Torpor Orb, for example. Then we've got Dauntless Dismantler, which is basically here is a hard target for Affinity, right? It not only makes all of their artifacts enter tapped, which includes their artifact lands, it includes stuff like Drix Interlacer, which stops the Emery Loop, right? It delays the Emery Loops by an entire turn. But you can also, sacrifice this to destroy a bunch of the opponent's cheap artifacts, which you can then reuse with Extraction Specialist as well. So Dismantler feels very important as a tutor target here, especially because Affinity did get new tools from the TMNT set. And then Jarina, really, really nice sideboard card here, which not only doubles up as graveyard hate, but it also protects your board from just, spot removal in general, but also, very importantly, destruction-based sweepers, like Culling Ritual, like Damnation or Supreme Verdict, for example. So this is a really nice card, especially with Extraction Specialist, like I explained earlier. And then Brutal Cathar is basically, a 4 I bring in alongside Seam Rip against the, the creature decks, the faster decks. And the main reason I'm running this over, just extra spot removal is because of Birthing Ritual, right? We can go Juggernaut Peddler on turn 2, Birthing Ritual, get Brutal Cathar, which is very, very good against decks like, Auras or Wizards, like I mentioned earlier. The main reason I'm running this over Skyclave Apparition is because of the mana base, right? We don't have enough white sources to consistently have double white to be able to just hardcast this. Now, obviously, we do have Noble Hierarch and Avacyn's Pilgrim, which help with that, but we really don't want to have to put Cavern of Souls or Echoing Cavern on Spirit, really, if we can avoid it. So I've gone for Brutal Cathar for that reason. Plus, not to mention, it does kind of synergize with Jarina. It can't be counted off Cavern of Souls as well. If you rework the mana base, you could maybe replace this with Skyclave Apparition, but I don't think the difference is that big that it's worth doing that, if that makes sense. And then finally, I've got one copy of Fairy Macabre, which is basically tutorable graveyard hate off Recruiter of the Guard, which we can use immediately, which is absolutely huge because, the only other options that you've really got off Recruiter of the Guard are stuff like Remorseful Cleric, which costs 2 mana, Scavenging Ooze, which costs 3 mana to even get going. So being able to, go Birthing Ritual, sack a 2-drop, get Recruiter of the Guard during your end step, find Fairy Macabre, and then just have it up immediately against decks like Reanimator or Phoenix or, any other graveyard synergy deck feels really huge to me. I mean, obviously, the one downside of this is you do have to take Gigantha out of the companion, but Gigantha is basically just nice upside here. It's not absolutely huge in the deck. So that's the deck overall. Like I said a few times, I do feel like going too all-in on the Food Chain Primal Prayers or going too all-in on tutoring the Food Chain or going too all-in on the Food Chain combo itself isn't the best plan right now in the interactive decks, but for me, this feels like a really nice balance where we have pretty consistent access to turn 2 or 3 wins off Food Chain, especially in the uninteractive matchups, and then you have a really strong grind game against the interactive decks as well. If you got any comments or questions about the deck at all, definitely let me know in the comments. I'd love to chat to you about that. And next up, we got some gameplay so you guys can see the deck in action. Either way, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Big up! Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this hand looks pretty good to me. Right, the 2 Birthing Rituals is the main thing that's carrying this hand. So we can go, Avacyn's Pilgrim on turn 1, or potentially Esper Sentinel, depending on what the opponent leads on. And then we can go Birthing Ritual plus Esper Sentinel on turn 2, which is pretty nice. So Ponder and a Dimir land. So against Dimir, if we are just against straight Dimir rather than the Aquatic Subtlety build, having access to double Birthing Ritual is huge here. Now, I typically do like leading with Esper Sentinel against Dimir, but with this sort of hand, I'm going to lead on Avacyn's Pilgrim because if the opponent does use a Fatal Push here, that will cut them off Counterspell mana, which then clears the way for Birthing Ritual. And if they don't use a spot removal, then we can go Birthing Ritual into Esper Sentinel next turn. Okay, so they do have Tamiyo plus Fatal Push, but this is huge because as long as they don't have Force of Negation, we should just be good to resolve Birthing Ritual here, which is absolutely massive, right? Like I said, Dimir just doesn't have good ways to remove enchantments really, and this is just going to help us grind really, really well into the long game. So next turn we can obviously go second Birthing Ritual into Esper Sentinel, and the Esper Sentinel can be given uncounterable because of the Cavern of Souls, which is really nice. The opponent did pass back with just full mana open here though, so instead of doing that, because you know, if we cast Birthing Ritual, I'm sure they'll hit it with a counterspell. I'm going to go for Recruiter of the Guard here, give it uncounterable, and then you know, that will resolve, and then we can tutor for Tajik, which we can then cast off uncounterable next turn. So it basically just makes their counterspells completely irrelevant here. And obviously we can sacrifice Recruiter of the Guard to get basically any creature from our deck with Birthing Ritual. They crack the clue now, so this might be Fatal Push if they're doing it before our end step. Yeah, okay, so Fatal Push, but that's a really good exchange for us, right? They basically just 2-for-1 themselves. We got the Tajik. They had to crack a clue probably earlier than they wanted to. Now they can't flip Tamiyo this turn if they wanted to in order to do that. And then next turn, we can just jam Tajik, right? There's nothing they can really run to stop it, apart from, I guess, maybe Dismember. But I've barely seen any, Dimir decks main decking Dismember, at the very least. Maybe towards the start of the format, but now, you know, I think running Dismember is pretty risky against decks that have good reach, like Izzet Wizards or, you know, Jund with Pyrogoyf, for example. So I'm pretty confident that next turn we'll be able to just go Tajik, resolves, and then we could also then use Birthing Ritual with the creature that Tajik conjures, which is really huge. So they're tapping out here to flip the Tamiyo. So there's maybe now an argument to going for Birthing Ritual while their shield's down, because then we can still go Tajik next turn with the Cavern of Souls once they do have mana open. But Tajik is a card that just scales very well, you know, especially because they've got a flip Tamiyo as well. We want to be applying pressure to that. So I think I'm still... Okay, they have a Tamiyo to block as well. So they're pretty well equipped to protect the Tamiyo here. So there is maybe an argument to going Birthing Ritual now. But I'm just going to get Tajik in play, right? We've already got a Birthing Ritual in play. I just want to start applying pressure to this Tamiyo, right? We're not going to be able to deal any damage to it this turn because the creature that we conjure will go down to a 0-1, and they can obviously block the Tajik. Still going to attack with both. But, you know, because there's no haste creatures that Dimir run that we need to hold Tajik back for. But yeah, I think just getting Tajik down whilst they have a flip Tamiyo makes the most sense here. Wow, does the opponent have Snuff Out here, maybe? Yeah, okay. They snuff out the 1-drop. I mean, I'm pretty happy about that. So they don't really do anything with the Birthing Ritual there. Well, sorry, we don't have anything to do with Birthing Ritual, but, you know, even if they do pass with mana open here, having this Cavern of Souls is absolutely huge because we can go Recruiter of the Guards or Esper Sentinel if we really want to ensure that resolves. And then we've still got Birthing Ritual going, and then, you know, Tajik is just going to keep ticking up, putting bigger and bigger creatures into play. So even though they do have a flip Tamiyo, which is, you know, oftentimes going to be good against go-wide aggressive decks, Tajik is going to be able to outscale and start applying pressure to reduce the loyalty. Wow, they're attacking with the Tamiyo. That's a bit of a surprise. Okay, they do have Psychic Frog, which makes our attacks a little bit worse. Ooh, another Cavern of Souls is pretty nice. So I think I'm going to try the Birthing... Actually, no, hold on. I was going to go Birthing Ritual plus Recruiter of the Guard, but I think if we go Esper Sentinel first, like, I'm pretty confident the opponent has a counterspell from the way they've been playing, constantly holding mana open. So I'm going to lead on Esper Sentinel uncounterable here, and then I'm going to try Birthing Ritual, and if they do counterspell it, we get to draw an extra card here, which is pretty nice. And obviously having Esper Sentinel in play is going to be useful anyway. Yeah, there is the counterspell, so we get an extra card here. And we do get an extra Recruiter, so we don't get to cast Recruiter this turn, unfortunately, but that's not really a massive deal, right? There's nothing... the main thing that we would get with Recruiter here is Guardian Evangel, which we can still do, you know, both next turn if we wanted to. So opponent is going to get a clear block on the Vindicator here, but we're starting to deal damage to the Tamiyo. You know, the main thing I'm worried about with this Tamiyo is them getting to the ultimate. So between Birthing Ritual and Tajik, I think we should be able to, deal with that fairly effectively. It's putting them in an awkward spot as well. Hold on, let me just think about what we get here. So I think on this board state with an Esper Sentinel in play already, I prefer to get an Evangel just to ensure that we have extra pressure for the Tamiyo in play. It also makes potential Extraction Specialists off the top better as well, because we'll already have Evangel in the graveyard to be able to bring back with it. But yeah, I feel pretty good in this spot, right? Even though Tamiyo is a bit of a concern, they're in an awkward position now where if they attack with Psychic Frog to draw, then Tamiyo's really vulnerable to our attacks. You know, we're going to be making a flyer next turn as well, which is going to be relevant if we do need to potentially block Psychic Frog if they just invest a bunch of cards into that. So I feel pretty good about this spot. You know, getting Tajik down that turn feels like the right play now, right? We could have resolved that second Birthing Ritual, but, you know, I think just getting more power in play to get rid of this Tamiyo is the main concern at the moment. So we'll see what the opponent does here. Again, they're in a pretty tricky situation where if they don't have great cards in hand, they probably have to attack with the Psychic Frog, which does leave them very vulnerable, or leaves their Tamiyo very vulnerable at least. But yeah, opponent in the tank here. Okay, looks like they are going to attack with the Psychic Frog, which I think is pretty good for us. It kind of implies to me that they don't have a very good hand, because keeping Psychic Frog back to block does kind of limit our options, especially if they're plussing with the Tamiyo. Wow, and they Fatal Push Esper Sentinel, which I'm kind of surprised about, because the Evangel basically means that we should be able to kill Tamiyo this turn, I think. Unless they... Oh, they minus the Tamiyo. Okay, again, that's great for us as well. Means that it should just be easy to kill the Planeswalker here. So take out the Evangel. Yeah, Tajik just soloing this game. Tajik plus Cavern is so good in these sorts of matchups. Oh, okay. Extraction Specialist off the top is nice. Now we could go Extraction Specialist, get back Evangel, tap down their lands, and then just cast a second one. Or we could go for Recruiter as well, but I think Extraction Specialist feels like the better play here. And then we can make both the Extraction Specialist and the Sigardian Evangel that we get off it uncounterable, because we have two Caverns here as well. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up, so we got there, nice. So, against Dimir, I mean, I'm not really sure we want to sideboard much at all here, right? Jarina's maybe a possibility, but they don't seem to be on Goyf, and we didn't see Treasure Cruise either. And honestly, the main sweeper that Dimir runs usually is Toxic Deluge, which Jarina doesn't protect against, really. So unless we see Damnation or we see Goyf plus Treasure Cruise, which we haven't seen either of yet, then I'm not really sure we want Jarina here. So I'm kind of tempted to just run it back as it is. I don't think we really want anything else. We don't need the Graveyard Hate. Maybe Haywire Might is a possibility. It's a good card to have access to in case they're running, you know, some artifact or enchantment-based hate cards. And maybe we want a Brutal Cathars as a tutor target as well. So I'll just, you know, hedge a little bit with Haywire Might and Brutal Cathar, but I don't want to change things too much, really. Like I said, Jarina is mainly effective against Jund, where they're almost guaranteed to run the Goyfs, and a lot of the sweepers that they will be running are destruction-based. Obviously, they can run Toxic Deluge as well, but this hand, I mean, it's kind of rough if they Thoughtseize away the Witch Enchanter, but... So here, because I don't want to get hit by the... it's tricky, because if they do have Thoughtseize turn 2, we're kind of vulnerable here. But I'm just going to go for the Noble Hierarch, because I think there's a chance the opponent might tap out for a Psychic Frog here. And if they do, we can just combo off. And if they don't kill the Noble Hierarch, then next turn we can just go, you know, Esper Sentinel plus Haywire Might and have the mana open to activate it. But they do tap out as a Psychic Frog. So if they don't have Force of Negation here, which I'm not sure they would want to keep in against us from what they saw game 1, we can just go Food Chain, Sigardian Evangel, and then just basically make infinite, you know, Sigardian Evangels. And we can also get Esper Sentinel in play as well. Now, it's a little bit unfortunate we don't have a win condition here, because I think there's a decent chance they boarded in a board sweeper against us. So if we do, you know, spend 5 minutes of our clock getting down all the Evangels and they do have a board sweeper, that's going to be a little bit rough, but I think it's definitely the play to go for. And also, if they do have that, then if they do have Toxic Deluge, which I think is the only card that saves them here, we get to draw a card off the Esper Sentinel, and then that gives us 2 looks to find our third land. And if we find our third land, we can go Extraction Specialist, get back Sigardian Evangel and combo off again, which forces them to have another Toxic Deluge. So I think this definitely feels like the right line to go for. Right, we go here. The fact the opponent isn't conceding, I mean, it doesn't guarantee that they have Toxic Deluge, because they can obviously draw a card off Psychic Frog to give them another look at it. They can obviously draw one off the top as well. So it makes sense for the opponent to make us play it out regardless. But yeah, so basically the only tip I really have for performing this combo is play fast and also use your spacebar for auto-paying with the food chain and submitting as well, because otherwise you have to keep moving your mouse from the center down to the right every single loop. So just make sure that you're using the spacebar to make it go a little bit quicker. But yeah, unfortunately, similar to the Traveler combo, this is another one where you just have to play quickly. And I don't love, Arena kind of turning into an RTS for combos like this, but it's just how it is. We don't have a way to perform infinite loops on the client, so you just got to play as quickly as you can. But yeah, regardless, if the opponent makes us play this out, I'm just going to edit it to the end of the combo, so you guys don't just have to sit here watching me endlessly click Sigardian Evangels into play. Okay, so we're at 16. I think I'm just going to do one more and then stop, because I know we're gonna start timing out pretty soon anyway from my past experience with this. So I'm gonna ship it back. Sigardian Evangel goes to the graveyard, and then, like I said, if the opponent has Toxic Deluge, which I think is the only card that saves them here, we then get 2 looks at a land to hopefully find the third land to go Extraction Specialist. I guess we could also, actually no, it doesn't really matter, because we can go Haywire Might, exile the Haywire Might to produce 2 mana. We don't even need the third land because of the Haywire Might here. So okay, yeah, so it looks like opponent is attacking here, which is a very good sign. This might just mean that they, have the third land but don't have the Toxic Deluge yet. Or I guess it could mean they have the Toxic Deluge but they don't have the third land. Or I guess it could also mean they have both and they just want to get in for damage, but I'm not sure they would discard multiple cards if they already have both. Okay, there's the third land. They shook it in. They haven't conceded yet. That's a bad sign. Okay, they do have the Toxic Deluge, which is pretty rough. But, we drew Imidane's Recruiter. Okay, so now we should just be good to win regardless, right? We can go Extraction Specialist, get the Sigardian Evangel back. So even if they do have another Toxic Deluge, it doesn't matter because we have the Imidane's Recruiter to win here. So we get the Evangel off the Extraction Specialist, conjure one into our hand, and then we can just go again. And again, going to edit it out so you don't have to sit through me casting Evangels, unless the opponent just concedes. But again, I don't think the opponent is likely to concede here, because if assuming they have a second Toxic Deluge in their deck, they can draw one off the top. So yeah, I think unlikely that the opponent will concede here. So yeah, probably just going to edit this out until we have, maybe 6 or 7 Evangels in play, and then we can cast the Recruiter to go for the win. Okay, so we've gone a little bit overkill with this. We've already got 7 in play, which I don't think we really need as many, but I wanted to play around Snuff Out at the very least. So now we can just go Imidane's Recruiter, give our whole board +1/+0 in haste, and that should be it. So we got there nice. That felt pretty good. Okay, so we're on the play here. And, oh man, this is a risky hand to keep, but, if we draw Sigardian Evangel or Recruiter of the Guard, we just win on turn 3. So, I'm going to risk it, right? And I'm also going to sack the Prismatic Vista to thin the deck out as well, just to increase our chances a little bit. Plus, Echoing Cavern is also kind of a nice stopgap here, because even if we do whiff, we can still go Hierarch, Food Chain, Avacyn's Pilgrim, and then use Echoing Cavern to give us another look at finding either Evangel or Recruiter of the Guard. So Echoing Cavern also is kind of, if we didn't have the Echoing Cavern, then it's a little bit more of a sketchy keep, but Seat of the Synod. Okay, so likely going to be against Affinity here by the looks of things. Yeah, Springleaf Drums. So This is a matchup where comboing off early is going to be absolutely huge, I think, because they do, well, not all builds run counterspells, but I think it's pretty likely they're going to be on counterspells here. So I'm going to resolve the food chain now while they don't have counterspells up, because it's very unlikely they're going to have a way to remove the food chain. And then if we happen to draw Sigardian Evangel or Recruiter of the Guard off the top, we can make that uncounterable with the Cavern of Souls, and then I guess the mana that we produce off food chain can't help to pay for the Metallic Rebuke, though, so they could obviously stop us that way, but yeah, we'll see. Okay, Thought Monitor. So really need to find a combo enabler for food chain soon, I think. Okay, Peddler's not a bad pickup here, though. We can hopefully use this to either get rid of a counterspell or get rid of some more of their top end. Okay, there is the Rebuke, so we just get rid of that. And the opponent doesn't really have too much going on here. So there's a chance that next turn we can just go, even if we don't draw Recruiter or Sigardian, we can just go Echoing Cavern, exhaust it, try and find another Recruiter or Sigardian Evangel. Let's just hope the opponent doesn't draw anything too good here, though. Okay, they just cast the Juggernaut, and they don't have access to blue mana here, which is pretty huge. So I'm going to block with the... actually, no, I'm just going to let that through, actually, just because we might need the extra mana. Extraction Specialist is not that useful here, so really hope to find a Recruiter or a Sigardian Evangel off the Echoing Cavern here. Yikes, that's not what we want to find. But we can play the other Hierarch, and we can... Oh, what am I doing? I should have attacked with the Peddler. Sorry, I completely blanked about the Exalted then for a second. I should have attacked with the Peddler there. That was really stupid. I mean, I don't think it's, with this sort of hand that we're going to win just chipping away with damage, but, that would have... Oh, come on. Okay, Krang draw 4 is pretty good. But yeah, if we'd attack with the Peddler, there's a chance they block with the Juggernaut, and we don't have to, lose 2 creatures here. So I'm definitely going to double block the Juggernaut, and I think now with a Krang in play and with Thought Monitor attacking in the air, I'm going to just be forced to chump block with the Hierarch as well. So we're running out of time to find a combo enabler here, and there's a good chance they draw another Metallic Rebuke off the Krang here, which is a little bit awkward, but we can obviously go Extraction Specialist with Cavern, bring back Juggernaut, Peddler to try and clear the way. Okay, there's Drix Interlacer as well. Wow, another land. So yeah, this hand was a risky keep, and we have had a lot of looks at... I think we're still likely to win if we draw a Recruiter or Evangel now, but, we're running out of time here. So we can Extraction Specialist, get back the Peddler just to, if they do have another Krang, for example, or another Thought Monitor, getting rid of that is going to be a really big deal. So we'll see what they've got here. Oh, wow, they got Galvanic Blast. Interesting. So we can obviously sack it to Food Chain, which will enable us to cast Gigantha this turn, which is pretty nice. Right, we can put Gigantha into our hand, and then obviously want to sack the tapped Hierarch to cast this. And I want to make sure that we have the other Hierarch back to block. And we're still in a position now where Recruiter of the God or Evangel off the top probably does win it for us. But, with Tamiyo and Retrofit Foundry, they're going to be able to start drawing a lot off this Drix Interlacer. So we're kind of forced here to just block the Krang. If they'd attacked with the 4/4, I think we probably just block the 4/4 with Gigantha and just chump the Krang. But... yeah, I think we have to block the Krang here. But again, still, if we can find a Recruiter or Sigardian Evangel off the top, I think we've got a pretty good chance here. They can obviously flip the Tamiyo if they wanted to. Oh no, come on. That's obviously rough. Now Tamiyo flips, they draw another 3. Could very likely be a counterspell in there. Again, if we can draw an Evangel or a Recruiter, we still have a good chance here. Although Pinnacle Emissary with Interlace is going to be difficult. And there's Thought Monitor as well. So, we're not dead in the air yet. right? That's only 6 damage in the air. So technically, if we can go off this turn, we might be all right. Because, right, we get, you know, essentially infinite Evangels down on the ground. We take, what was that? 5 in the air, and then we can just attack around what they've got here. So we still have a turn to draw them. Although, again, I think it's fairly likely they might have a counterspell at this point. Yeah, okay, just draw a land. So unfortunately, we didn't get there, but we did have that was a game where the opponent did have, a lot going on, and we still could have won there if we'd happened to draw it. So this is definitely the matchup for Dauntless Dismantler and Haywire Might. I think we might want a one of Brutal Cathars to tutor for in order to remove, big creatures, and I definitely think Seam Rip is probably more useful than Esper Sentinel. Extraction Specialist, going to trim, and then I think I'm also going to trim an Avacyn's Pilgrim. And then I think I'm pretty happy with this. Right, we've got a lot of good cards we can tutor for. Maybe the Brutal Cathars is not as important. Maybe I'm supposed to keep in the 4 Avacyn's Pilgrim just to give us the max chances of accelerating into Food Chain. Because Brutal Cathar, the only cards we're really going to... Brutal Cathar on Emery is pretty important. I was going to say Brutal Cathar on Krang is risky, especially when they're running Galvanic Blast, because... especially if they're empty-handed, they could just use Galvanic Blast, kill the Brutal Cathar, get back Krang and draw 4. Brutal Cathar is a slightly cheaper way of removing Kappa Cannoneer than Witch Enchanter as well. But yeah, I think the main reason we want Cathar in this matchup is to be able to remove Emery before they can start looping the Interlacer with it. But yeah, I do feel, now knowing what the matchup is, I do feel more confident keeping the more combo-focused hands. Although this hand looks pretty good to me, right? We've got early disruption into Birthing Ritual. We can also potentially tutor for Tajik, which I found pretty good in this matchup, assuming you can keep them off, their other proactive stuff as well. So I think I'm going to lead on Cavern here because, that it, keeps us with the most options next turn, depending on what we draw. Okay, there is Tamiyo. Oh, we draw Dauntless Dismantler. Okay, so I think I'm going to run that out on turn 2 as opposed to Peddler. If they have Galvanic Blast, then it's obviously worse. But they need to get the artifacts in play for Galvanic Blast to work. If they have artifact lands, they'll be entering tapped. The clue tokens will be entering tapped. Retrofitter Foundry will be entering tapped. So I think it does make more sense to get Dismantler down here. And then next turn, I think... we can't go... Oh, okay, now I was going to say we can't go Juggernaut Peddler plus Seam Rip, but now we can. So I think I'll lead on Prismatic Vista, crack it for a Plains, and then we can go Peddler first to see what they've got going on. And then we can obviously Seam Rip the Tamiyo. They're pretty far away from Thought Monitor and Krang at the moment. And I think we want to just take Galvanic Blast because they can obviously double blast to kill the Dismantler here, which we don't want. And then, Seam Rip can take out the Tamiyo, which would then give them the 3rd artifact, meaning that the single Galvanic Blast shouldn't be good enough to take out the Dismantler here. So yeah, we'll Seam Rip the Tamiyo. So they would need to draw like another 0 mana or 1 mana artifact off the top to be able to kill Dismantler with that Galvanic Blast next turn. See what they got here. Oh, they do have an artifact land, unfortunately. So that does enter tapped because of the Dismantler, but they can then kill it. So here we can either go Birthing Ritual. They don't have counter spells up this turn, so I think while they don't have counters, they don't have Rebuke up. They could have Machinist Dismissal off the top potentially, but I think it makes more sense to get Birthing Ritual down here because, if we find another Juggernaut Peddler off it, or we find a... I guess we've cut the Extraction Specialist, but if we find another Peddler here, it's pretty huge. So, I think we just go for Recruiter here. And then we can Recruiter up Tajik. We could Recruiter up another Peddler. We could Recruiter up Brutal Cathars, Witch Enchanter potentially as well. So usually I like going for Tajik in these sorts of spots, but because they have Thought Monitor and Krang, I'm kind of tempted to just go Peddler here. And then if they cast one, I very much doubt they'll be able to cast both in the same turn. And obviously we can then Peddler whatever they draw as well. So I think I'm going to go for Peddler here. Maybe I'm supposed to just go for Tajik to prioritize our proactive game plan, but you know, they're not that close to casting. Well, oh, there is a 0-mana artifact. Okay, so they can cast both of them here. Well, not both. They can cast either of them. So there is the Krang. And they do have Mox Amber live now. But yeah, this is the sort of thing I want to be able to Peddler away that Thought Monitor. Just to ensure they don't have, you know, a lot of ways to go over the top of us here. Okay, they do have a Galvanic Blast, but not as bothered about that right now. And now we can go Recruiter the Guard. And I think I would just get Tajik here. Right, we do need to start closing the game out and applying pressure. Although maybe there's a chance we're supposed to get Imidane's Recruiter with our current board. So here, I think we want to get Sigardian Evangel just to get more power in play. And I'm not sure. I think with Recruiter in play, I want to have a Recruiter in play just in case we find a Witch Enchanter off the top, right? It's useful to have a 3-mana creature in play so that we can cast everything we find off Birthing Ritual, but getting Evangel in play is going to be really useful because it just puts more power into play. And now the opponent's, you know, pretty out of gas, right? I mean, obviously, the issue against Affinity is, especially against what looks like the opponent's build, has a lot of ways to refuel. But yeah, if they're just casting Juggernaut here, I'm pretty happy about that. I am going to double block. They obviously can blow us out with the Galvanic Blast, but with Birthing Ritual and Tajik, I'm not too worried about losing on the board, really. Like, we should be able to go over the top of whatever the opponent's doing. And, you know, Krang not having unblockable like Kappa Cannoneer makes such a big difference here. So I'm going to run out the Tajik. And then the Avacyn's Pilgrim. And now we've got our proactive game plan going as well. So obviously we're forced to attack with the Recruit, which we will lose, but, you know, we've still got Birthing Ritual ticking over, we've got Tajik ticking over, the opponent doesn't have too much going on by the looks of things, and we do find another Juggernaut Peddler here, so even if they have drawn another impactful card here, we should be able to get rid of it with the Peddler. So we'll see what they got going on. Okay, just a land. Obviously they can crack the clue, though. Okay, Retrofit Foundry, not too bothered about that. Forced to attack, and just trying to think whether I want to double block or not. I probably do. Right, I'll trade a 2-2 for a 5-3. It's a pretty good exchange. And they can't really blow us out with Galvanic Blast, because if they kill the Juggernaut Peddler, that doesn't really make a difference. Okay, so they're just going to go for the clue crack instead of Juggernaut. So I think the onus is on us to go a little bit more aggressive now. So we can Recruiter for Evangel. We can Recruiter for Haywire Might as well, which seems slightly better to me because that can take out the Retrofitter Foundry, which is their only real other engine at the moment. We could obviously play the Hierarch, but I think I want to hold open the mana for the Haywire Might here because they can just gum up the board with tokens every single turn with the Retrofitter Foundry. And the Exalted on Vindicator is pretty nice here because if they do block, we get to take out the Krang. Kind of surprised they did block there, but I guess they're on the back foot regardless. Presumably they make a token here, and I'm going to use the Haywire Might in response to the token. I mean, they don't have enough mana to untap and use it again anyway, but I feel like it's the best, you know, chance to use it now. They do crack the clue, so they do get 2 looks at, you know, something like another Krang, which is kind of scary, but okay, kind of a miss on the Birthing Ritual this time. I don't think we want to sack anything there. But I feel pretty good about this spot, right? As long as they don't draw another Krang or, you know, chain together a bunch of Thought Monitors, I feel like we should be pretty good here. Oh, there is a Thought Monitor. And they do get to flip the Tamiyo as well. That's a little bit rough. Okay, they plus the Tamiyo. Don't have enough mana for the Juggernaut, though. Wow, and a Krang as well. Again, though, it's only a 6/4. So, like, you know, unlike... I'd be much scared... I'd be much more scared of Kappa Cannoneer in spots like this. Okay, there's Moxamba. And there is Emery Hard. That is a bit of a concern. We'll see what they mill. But they can just chain Cranks together off the Emery now. So, that is a way they can potentially start going over the top. Ooh, okay. Evangel's a huge draw here, right? Just trying to think what we want to tap down. So, I think we definitely want to tap down the Thought Monitor and the Krang. And then we can cast the High Rock here. And then I think we just want to focus on taking out the Tamiyo this turn. They can obviously block the Tajik with the Retrofitter Foundry token, which does keep the Tamiyo alive here, but we do have a lot of creatures in play now. Ooh, and we find Brutal Cathar. That's huge. Now we can exile the Emery, and that really limits their ability to grind into the long game here. So, yeah, sideboarding that in has come up clutch. I mean, it was mainly there as a tutor target, but, yeah, finding off Ritual, absolutely huge there. Wow, they minus the Tamiyo, getting back... So presumably they're going to take out the Brutal Cathar, get Emery back online, but now they don't have protection from our wide board anymore, right? The +1 was doing a lot of work at just slowing us down, and next turn we get the... can't remember the name of it, the lifelink trample card off the Tajik. Wow, I'm surprised they're attacking here. I mean, I guess that does kind of force us to block the Krang, which does limit our attacks the next turn. I mean, maybe it doesn't even, really, because we could let the damage through. The only thing I'm really worried about is Kappa Cannoneer, which takes a couple turns to get going. Okay, there is the Juggernaut. But yeah, we're definitely on the front foot here. Oh, wow. Evangel off the top. That might be good enough for lethal with the card that we get off Tajik here, right? And even if it's not, we're going to have a huge board going into next turn. So even if they... Well, hold on. Let me work it out here. So we go up to 5, 8... Yeah, well, Evangel again. Tap down one of their lands. And yeah, that should be lethal. Okay, so that felt pretty good. Again, I mean, I think the best way to win this matchup is Food Chain, right? Because... Sorry, I'm just trying to think if I want to change how we sideboarded after we've seen a few more cards. Stern Scolding is definitely a card I want to be aware of, but Cavern of Souls is, you know, a good way to bypass that. But yeah, this is definitely a matchup where, as long as we can play through their counter spells, Food Chain is just going to be the main way to go over the top. But it's encouraging to see that, you know, you can win that matchup even against super grindy builds that are running Thought Monitor and Krang just off the back of, you know, Tajik and Sigardian Evangel, and we didn't even use Imodane's Recruiter is a card that we could have searched up to just go super wide and attack the opponent as well. So obviously being on the draw is going to be a little bit more difficult here, especially because they're going to be able to get their counter spells online a little bit sooner. But, you know, the fact we haven't got Food Chain off yet, and I was going to say, here we go. This looks like a great start for the Food Chain combo. So whilst it would be nice to Seam Rip here, I'm definitely just going to run out the Avacyn's Pilgrim. Because if we can resolve Food Chain, I think we're good. I don't think there's much they can do to stop Food Chain once it's already in play. Really hope they tap out here. Wow, okay, they don't have enough mana for Metallic Rebuke. I mean, Machinist Dismissal or Force of Negation are possible concerns here, but... Okay, Food Chain resolves. That's huge. Because now for them to win, they have to basically be able to counter both of the Recruiters here. And if they tap out here, we win immediately, right? Because we can Recruiter for Evangel, do the loop, then Recruiter for Imodane's Recruiter to attack this turn. See if they hold mana open or not, though. Wow, okay, they tap out. I mean, they could obviously play Mox Amber here, which would be a concern. because then they could still have Metallic Rebuke up. So pretty, crazy start from the opponent here. But yeah, it looks like it's not going to be good enough. Right, so we tap the Pilgrim for mana, go for Recruiter, and then, most of the time it's a good idea for the opponent to let you play it out. But if, I always advise if you've got Recruiter, if you've got the second Recruiter in your hand, to do it earlier in the combo so that the opponent can see you've got the way to win, and then hopefully they'll concede and not have to make you play it out. I mean, regardless, it's just the way combos work. There's no shade to the opponent if they do want to make us play it out, especially because clock is part of the game as well. And if you are taking 5 minutes every single game to do the combo, there is a chance that you might time out as a win condition as well. So again, don't ever get upset at your opponent for making you play it out, because, that's just how the game works. They're completely entitled to. But hopefully if you show the opponent that you have the Immodanes, they're more likely to concede at the very least. So either way, we'll just keep making the Guardian Evangels. We do need to make more than usual, but it's really important to not forget about the Tamiyo plus here, because okay, yeah, thankfully the opponent does scoop it. Yeah, that felt really good. We got there, nice. Okay, so on the play here, and I mean, this is close. I think I'm going to keep this one because, Peddler on 2, into Evangel, into Recruiter can win a decent amount of matchups. Now, against Gigantha, either going to be against Jund or Izzet Wizards. Okay, so it looks like we're against Jund here. So Peddler is actually a pretty big card here. And Esper Sentinel also means we've got a decent curve out, right? We can go Evangel into Esper Sentinel next turn, but definitely going to lead on the Peddler, see what the opponent's got. Wow, okay, that's a pretty stacked hand. So I don't think we really care as much about the Jarsil. The Grist is the main thing I'm worried about here, I think, because that can obviously take out our creatures. It can start pumping stuff on the board. This does mean that they're going to be able to cast Fable next turn, though, which is a little bit annoying, but I think that's less problematic immediately than Grist anyway. Okay, so we find Cavern. I think we'll run that out, and we'll go Evangel, tap down the 2/2, and then just run out the Esper Sentinel. And then we don't need to worry about Pyrogoyf yet. I mean, we do kind of give it at least one extra power and toughness because we're discarding the Evangel. But I guess the Fable loots as well. That will turn on the Pyrogoyf pretty quickly. So, yeah, this might be a tricky one where we kept kind of a borderline hand and the opponent's hand was pretty stacked. So, yeah, this might be a tricky one. So opponent attacks in. We'll definitely trade here because we don't want them keep making extra mana off the token every single turn. And then presumably they can play Pyrogoyf here, taking out either the Sentinel or the Peddler. Wow, they go for Thoughtseize and they give us a card. I mean, kind of sucks that we drew a land, but I'm happier to see that than I am Pyrogoyf for sure. Okay, they take the Recruiter, leaves us with Evangel, and then they run out Jarsil. Okay, interesting. Oh, okay, Birthing Ritual is a nice pickup. That can help us a lot in this sort of matchup. So we can now run out the Birthing Ritual, run out the Evangel, tapping down the Jarsil, and then we can still keep getting aggressive, right? Opponent's already going to be down to 11 here. And then we do get a Birthing Ritual trigger straight away. Oh, we find Extraction Specialist. That's huge because we can now sacrifice the Peddler. Just going to check we don't have anything better. But yeah, now we can sack the Peddler, get the Extraction Specialist, get back the Peddler, and then get rid of that Pyrogoyf unless they've got something even more threatening in hand. Okay, they do have Barrogoyf, but I don't think we really care about that as much as the Pyrogoyf. So now that Birthing Ritual draw feels like it's completely changed the dynamic of this game. Now I feel like we've actually got a decent chance. Barrogoyf can be a bit of an issue, but we've already got a lot of bodies in play, and especially with Birthing Ritual, I think we can get on board enough to either double block it or just keep chump blocking it every single turn. Wow, okay, opponent just scoops it up. So that one Birthing Ritual draw changed from really far behind to suddenly, really difficult for the opponent to win. So this is definitely the matchup for Jarina. Jarina's felt incredible in this matchup so far. And then in terms of cuts, it's tricky because we definitely want to keep Extraction Specialist in this matchup. So I think this is the only matchup where I really mess with the mana curve. I'm probably going to be trimming the mana dorks here, I think. Just trying to think if there's anything else that we want to cut here. But yeah, I think we probably trim on mana dorks, which does slow down our, speed. But with the opponent running a lot of creature removal and probably boarding in even more, the mana dorks are very likely to be killed on turn 1 anyway. So I think I would rather trim the mana dorks and just run as many high impact cards as possible. I also think Brutal Cathar might be important here, but I don't love trimming Extraction Specialist because it's so good with Jarina, if I'm being honest. So I don't know if we need the Brutal Cathar, to be honest. It's tricky to figure out the ratios. I think I'm going to ship it back. Oh no, I made a mistake there. I meant to keep in both Extraction Specialists and Trim a Pilgrim. That was my bad. But yeah, Extraction Specialist is definitely a good card in this matchup, especially with Jarina, so I think I did make a mistake there. Okay, this hand is obviously a little slow, but I think I'm going to keep it, right? Especially against Thoughtseize decks. Having Tajik is going to be big. Okay, there is Thoughtseize, so they could take Esper Sentinel, which would leave us with nothing before turn 4, but, we've got enough lands to cast everything. We've got mana we've got mana of each colour to be able to cast anything, so as long as we draw something playable in the next few turns, it shouldn't be too bad. And even if they don't have another Thoughtseize or they don't have a Jarsil to get rid of Tajik can also solo the game unless they have Dismember or Toxic Deluge, which they could have. Flooding out here is pretty rough though. But it looks like the opponent kept kind of a sketchy one-lander. So I'm going to put Gigantha into hand here, and then next time we can just go for Tajik, unless they have a Thoughtseize. So it looks like we're flooding out opponents was mana screwed. And typically, from my experience, Screwed tends to beat Flood because once they do find lands... Oh, they got Magus. But yeah, once they do find lands, we're... they've got a lot of stuff to cast. But Tajik is going to be huge in this matchup, I think. Assuming the opponent doesn't have Dismember. So we could Juggernaut Peddler to get rid of the Magus, but we've already got Plains. We've already got Gigantha, which is castable under Magus, and then once it's in play, can produce mana of every colour, right? We can go Gigantha, and then if it survives, we can tap Gigantha to cast Juggernaut Peddler, for example. We can also cast Witch Enchanter if they choose to play like a Fable of the Mirror Breaker, for example. So I don't think we're too bothered about Magus, especially while we have a Tajik in play. But if they go, for example, Magus into Dismember off the Spawn token, we'd be in trouble. But, I haven't seen too much Dismember recently. I feel like a lot of people have adjusted their mana base to account for the land hosers, and therefore Dismember has seen less play. But, you never know. It's not a bad card to run at the moment. So opponent doesn't run out Magus. Keep a black open, so maybe that's for Fatal Push, maybe? I think we'll just go to combat first, see if the opponent has anything they want to do pre-combat. So we'll attack in here. Okay, yeah, it was Fatal Push, so now they can just, trade with the Recruit. Oh, they didn't block. Okay. But either way, we get Gigantha down, so we can either attack, which is definitely a possibility because they're already down to 8, or if they do get multiple bodies down this turn, we could tap it for mana if we want to go for Peddler. But yeah, getting Tajik down, feels massive in this matchup. Okay, there is Pyrogoyf. So that does cut us off both lines that I was just talking about. Prismatic Vista's a little bit late here. We can obviously go for the Witch Enchanter if we just wanted to get extra power in play, but with Pyrogoyf in play... it's tricky. I'm not sure whether to hold the Witch Enchanter or play it out now. I think I'm going to hold it in case they have Fable, or I'm not sure what other artifacts or enchantments they might be running. But with an Indestructible Tajik, I'm not worried about them attacking, really. Okay, there is Barrogoyf. So I think next turn I might be forced to run out the Witch Enchanter just as a blocker here, because now they have 2 big attackers. So maybe we might get punished here for not using Peddler to get rid of the Magus, but... Tajik is still putting in work here. We've still got an indestructible blocker, which kind of mitigates the effectiveness of Barrogoyf. And they're down to 5 now, but again, they have got a lifelinker in play, so... Yeah, it's tricky. And like I said as well, you know, typically opponents who've got mana screw will have a lot of stuff to do once they do unlock their mana. Wow, Tarmogoyf as well. So it's a very good thing that we have this indestructible Tajik here, or we'd be in trouble. Wow, they take out the recruit. That's surprising. I thought they would take out the enchanter there if they're going to target a creature. Wow, they attack him with the Baragoyf. I mean, we can double block here, which I'm pretty happy to do. It does gain them 6 life, but they'd be gaining the 6 life either way. And this just gets the Baragoyf off the board for good. Do you think the opponent made a mistake there? Because if they'd taken out the Witch Enchanter, we didn't... Well, we wouldn't have been able to double block there. Okay, there is the Fable. Oh, we do find a Recruiter, which we can cast here, obviously. So we'll go for Recruiter here, and then... Imidane's Recruiter's not a bad one, right? We could, in theory, cast both modes of it the same turn if we wanted to. We could go for Extraction Specialist, but we don't have that much great stuff in the graveyard. So I think I'm going to go for the Imidane's Recruiter here. And then... we could obviously run it out now, but I think that, you know, kind of defeats the point a little bit. I think with the angel that we're going to get off the Tajik or the flyer, it makes more sense to go for both modes next turn, and then we get not only the draw mode off Aurelia, but we also get to get the Lightning Helix mode as well. So yeah, looking back on it, maybe we're supposed to take out the Magus, but again, you know, Tajik wouldn't be as dominant on the board if we had done that. And if they'd had a second Magus, for example, then we'd be in real trouble. We wouldn't have been able to cast the Tajik in the first place. So I think I think we probably did make the right call in playing out the Tajik here, but it's, you know, it's close. I could see an argument either way. Okay, looks like they're just going for Gigantha, which would be pretty big for us, I think. Right, they can attack him with the token. But now if we do both modes of Imidane's Recruiter, assuming they don't have a way to kill Aurelia, which not many Jund decks run, right? It would have to be Terminate or Assassin's Trophy or something. Then we can dome the opponent for 3 with the Helix mode, and, you know, even ignoring the blockers on the ground, Aurelia should be getting in for lethal in the air. So even if they block on the ground here, which they don't, you know, it's tricky for them because they've got a lot of creatures they need to block. They might have to throw away the Magus here, but, you know, if they don't have a way to kill the Aurelia, we're just winning in the air. Okay, they have Abrupt Decay for the Recruiter, but we should just win here, right? Unless I'm missing something. None of their creatures have reach, right? Yeah, okay, we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're on the play here. And yeah, I think we've got to keep this one right. Obviously, we don't have a way to go off with Food Chain yet, but if we draw a Sigardian Evangel or a Recruiter off the top, we can potentially go off on turn 2. And then, worst case scenario, we could just go Noble Hierarch into Peddler. And then, you know, we've still got Food Chain in case we do draw either of those. Obviously, slightly painful mana base here, which could be an issue maybe if we're against... Is it Wizards or maybe Jund? You know, if they have a start with multiple Goyfs early on, or Pyrogoyf into another Goyf, but we'll see what the opponent's on here. Okay, just Inspiring Vantage. Oh wow, we drew Evangel, okay. So it looks like we got the turn 2 win here, right? I mean, I don't think... if they're a red-white deck on this, they're like main decking Pyroclasm, they'll have any way to beat this. Plus, we obviously have the Juggernaut Peddler as well. So, you know, even if they do have a sweeper or a way to combo off on turn 2, they'd need 2 sweepers. So, yeah, I'm almost certain this is going to be good enough to win the game here, right? So now we can get a second Evangel down, and then... I think I'll go for Peddler early. There's a chance they might concede if they're trying to, hide information. Which would save us having to click through a million times. So now I think I'll go for for the peddler, see what they're on. Okay, opponent did try to concede to hide information, but we got to see what they're on. So it looks like they're on Mardu Goyfs. Which, I mean, I think we still want Jarina here. And then probably want Haywire Might, and then I'll trim the Avacyn's Pilgrim as well. I mean, it does mess with the curve, but against the Goyf decks, against the discard spell decks, I think it makes more sense to have a higher density of just high impact cards rather than, you know, obviously the mana dorks are really bad to draw late in the game, especially if the opponent's used early interaction to get rid of your best stuff. So, you know, it does make the curve a little bit more clunky, but it also means that our average draws off the top are going to be a lot better, which is important against the discard decks, I think. And to be fair, I think from what I've seen of the Mardu builds, they tend to have less interaction because they have more engine for their own proactive game plan, right? So here, I mean, we don't have green mana for Birthing Ritual yet, but I think we want to keep this, right? We've got decent cards. We can cast everything other than the Birthing Ritual, and obviously we've got, you know, a number of draw steps to find green mana, and we do find green mana off the Prismatic Vista, which is nice. But I'm going to lead on the Cavern of Souls. I'm going to run that Haywire Might here, which, I mean, obviously its main purpose bringing it in is to deal with hate cards, but they are running Overlord of the Baelmerk as well, so we can technically exile that before they get the opportunity to blink it with a Felliar or a Dollmaker. Okay, they do have Peddler. Wouldn't surprise me if they took the Birthing Ritual here. But we can still go Sigardian Evangel into Specialist, get back Haywire Might or Sigardian Evangel, so we have got kind of an aggressive start. Oh, classic Thoughtseize bug. We draw another Birthing Ritual off the top. I mean, we're definitely going to run that out. Right, obviously being in white, they are likely to have, or slightly more likely to have answers to it, but I don't, you know, I want to make sure we get it down before they use another discard effect. Wow, go blank. Haven't seen that one in a while. Definitely going to discard the Juggernaut, and I think with this hand, right, Extraction Specialist isn't particularly good with nothing in the graveyard. And it's nice to have two Evangels, because I obviously want to run an Evangel out this turn in order to have a creature to sack to Birthing Ritual, and then it's nice to have a backup, because if we draw Food Chain, we can then just immediately go off as well. So we'll see what we hit off the Birthing Ritual. Okay, interesting. So we could go Jarina, or we could go Extraction Specialist here. And I think I like going for Extraction Specialist. Right, it just gets more bodies in play. And obviously, you know, Jarina is nice to shut down the Goyfs, but the graveyards aren't that full yet, so I'm not too worried about that at the moment. And obviously, you know, we're pretty likely to find more Jarinas off the Birthing Ritual anyway. They do find a Barragoyf off the Overlord, though. But, you know, we can go double Evangel this turn. We've got a lot of good stuff to sack. So, there's maybe an argument for blocking here, but I don't know. I feel like I want to go aggressive here. Right, we can tap down their Juggernaut Peddler and get in with the Extraction Specialist. Obviously, the downside of letting the Peddler live is that they can blink it. Oh, we drew Food Chain, okay. So we should just be able to combo off here then, right? Okay, they Fatal Push. I mean, that doesn't help them really. This is another reason why I'm happy that we didn't trade there, because we wouldn't have been able to combo off this turn if we let the Specialist die. But now we can just play a bunch of Evangels out, and then obviously they could have Toxic Deluge, but you know, they would need to draw exactly that off the top here. They don't have any ways to dig for it, really. But again, you know, it makes sense if the opponent wants to play it out if they do have Toxic Deluge in the 75, because they could obviously draw it off the top. So if the opponent does make me play it out, I'll just edit it out so you don't have to see me clicking for ages. Oh, okay, opponent just scoops it up. I'll take that. So we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And I can't keep a one lander. Although, I don't know. We're on the draw. If we find our second and third land, we can just win with Food Chain into Recruiter. So I'm going to keep this. There is an Evangel as well. I mean, I really hope the opponent plays into these Esper Sentinels, or we might be in trouble here. Like, we need to draw lands. So Copperline Gorge could be Jund, maybe. Yeah, we'll see. Oh, okay, we're against Goblins. Maybe they're on Food Chain as well. Okay, land off the top is huge. And I think we just go for the second Sentinel, right? Because if they are on Food Chain, then triggering both the Esper Sentinels will give us a really good chance of finding our third land, and we have the Infinite here, right? We have Evangel into Recruiter. Although I guess if the opponent has Matron into Squee, we could be in trouble. Oh, wow. 1 mana Matron's pretty good. We really need to draw our third land here. Okay, there is Muxus, which they can cast next turn. And there's the third land. Okay. Oh, did get a little bit lucky there, but... You know, we are running 24 lands plus Mana Dorks for a reason. So it's kind of unfortunate I can't just reveal that I have the Recruiter to my opponent here, because with Muxus in hand... You know, I think that would be stupid to concede here, because obviously with Arena, I can only get a max of like 17 or 18 Evangels if I play super fast. So because they don't know that I have Recruiter, they can very easily go over the top of that with Muxus, especially if they have another Food Chain in hand. So I imagine they're going to make us play it out, in which case I'm going to edit it out. But yeah, I'm basically just going to make 7 or so Evangels. Obviously that is, you know, slightly more than we need, but... Whilst you have a little bit of time, I think it's always best to just make a couple more extra just in case you miscount here. So yeah, but either way, I doubt the opponent's going to concede with a Muxus in hand, so just going to edit out the rest of it so you don't have to sit there watching me click through Evangels for ages. So we got 6 down now. I think I'm just going to do 1 more, and then we can just sack 1 to cast the Recruiter, and that should be game. So we got that, nice. So post sideboard against Goblins. I mean, I have to assume they're running Food Chain, right? That's the main reason to return to Goblins at the moment. So Esper Sentinel doesn't seem very good. Seam Rip, I mean, is going to be important at slowing down their early stuff. And I think we want to run... Oh, no, we don't want to take out Recruiter. We want to take out Extraction Specialist for Brutal Cathar. And then, I don't think we really make any other changes. I don't want to cut a Mana Dork because accelerating into Food Chain seems super important. Seam Rip seems like good early interaction. Extraction Specialist doesn't seem very relevant because the opponent... Well, I doubt they're running much interaction outside of maybe Munitions Expert. And then there's obviously a variety of more expensive Goblins that could be problematic as well. So that's why I also think Brutal Cathars is pretty important. But again, I think for me, the big things are just Seam Rip, slow down the early acceleration... Juggernaut Peddler to get rid of Muxus or Food Chain. And honestly, I think, you know, especially the Goblins build, they're not going to have any more tutors or redundancy for Food Chain than we are, really. So I think we should have the edge with Peddler, with slightly more interaction, and a slightly easier to assemble Infinite as well, because the downside of Goblins, where you're reliant on Squee, is you need Food Chain plus Matron to find Squee, plus a payoff for the mana as well on top of that. So I think it's probably... It's more difficult for them to set up their combo than it is for us, especially because we have, you know, Peddler for hand interaction as well. But anyway, yeah, we'll find out in game 2. Okay, so going second here is obviously going to be a little bit more difficult. Just got to hope we either have a faster start or our interaction lines up well. This hand looks pretty good though, right? We've got Peddler on 2 to get rid of their Food Chain. And as long as we can find our third land before turn 3, we can just go Food Chain into Evangel. So, very happy with this hand. No turn 1 play from the opponent as well is huge for us. Okay, there's an Orcomancer. Wow, still not found the third land. It's a bit sketchy. So we'll Peddler here, see what they've got. Snoop, Battlecry, and War Chief. I mean, I think I'm more worried about the War Chief here. Battlecry and Snoop are both powerful cards as well, but I'm more worried about them accelerating into Muxus. So maybe I'm supposed to take Snoop, but You know, Battle Cry into War Chief is so much damage. I don't want to be forced to block with the Peddler because we really need it in play to be able to exile to Food Chain here. But maybe I'm supposed to take Snoop. I mean, it's tough. I think if we take Snoop, they have a really aggressive start. Oh, well, they got Muxus on top as well. Okay, so now I'm glad I took the War Chief. And there's the Battle Cry. We'll see if they attack. They don't attack. Oh, man, we missed the third land drop. That's really bad. So we'll Seam Rip. And, I mean, they're still a ways away from casting Muxus. I think Battle Cry is just a big issue here because we know they've got lands, right? They can just go land, double pump the Battle Cry, and we're nearly getting forced to block with the Peddler. I think that preserves our life total, hopefully enough. Oh, no, they drew Food Chain. Oh, no, that means they can probably cast Muxus this turn then, right? Oh, yeah, especially with a Skirk Prospector. Yikes, yeah, missing our third land drop there. Probably cost us the game. I mean, there's still a chance they can whiff with the Muxus, especially with a land on top. But if they find a Matron, for example, off the Muxus, they can just keep going. Or, I don't know if they're running Ringleader. That's another card that can allow them to kind of keep popping off with the Muxus. But yeah, I've got to pray they whiff on this. Oh, wow, okay. I think we're just dead this turn then. Right, I mean, even if we're not dead this turn, and we find our third land, we can go Food Chain, but we don't have a creature in play to exile. So yeah, missing our third land drop cost us that game. We do survive at 1, but we're dead to Confluence here anyway, so... That's a little bit unfortunate. I mean, but I guess, you know, swings and roundabouts. We did get fortunate to draw 2 lands the first game, so kind of even after that. But yeah, going into game 3 on the play, I do think, looking at how both decks are built, that we should have the advantage, right? We can go off, you know, generally easier than them. We have better interaction. I think they definitely have a better fair game plan, though, but, you know, we should have... You know, either way, we've got a lot of disruption for what they're doing as well. We've been now post-sideboard, we've got Seam Rip, we've got Brutal Cathars, we've got Juggernaut Peddler, so maybe our fair game plans are closer post-sideboard as well, but I think we definitely want to lead more into the Food Chain combo if we get access to it early this game. Okay, so on the play again... And, I mean, I think we've got to keep this, right? We got Food Chain plus Recruiter. We don't have anything before turn 3, but, you know, if we draw a 2-drop, we can just go, you know, regardless of what it is, whether it's Evangel or Recruiter, we can just run that out on turn 2, play Food Chain on turn 3, and then just go off with Recruiter. And I guess absolute worst case scenario, we can go turn 3 Brutal Cathars, exile one of their creatures, then the next turn Food Chain and go off. And still have access to the second Cathar to, you know, keep whatever their most problematic creature is off the board. But obviously, fingers crossed, we draw a 2-drop off the top. That'd be the best. I guess a 1-drop... Well, if we drew Seam Rip, that would be useful to slow them down a little bit. If we drew a Mana Dork, then, I mean, that wouldn't really speed us up. I guess actually, no, a Mana Dork would do the trick, right? If we draw a Mana Dork here, we can play it on turn 2, then tap it and exile it to Food Chain to cast Recruiter. Wow, another land. That's kind of rough. But being on the play here is huge, because if they run out a creature here, we can go Brutal Cathars, exile the creature, and then cast Food Chain afterwards. Okay, they do cast the Anarchomancer. So we'll just run out the Cathar, exile the Anarchomancer, hope they don't have a crazy turn 3, and then we just go Food Chain, exile the Cathar, get Recruiter, go off with Evangel, and then if we draw another Recruiter or an Imidane's Recruiter or a Sigardian Evangel, we can win this turn. If not, we still, you know, we can still go exile the Brutal Cathar, they'll get back the Anarchomancer, pop off with the Evangels, and then we still have the Cathar that can exile their most problematic permanent. Okay, War Chief. So, what do we want to do here? I don't think... Unfortunately, we still have to exile the Cathar here to go off, which doesn't mean they get the Anarchomancer back. But we can still exile the War Chief with Cathar, which should cut them off Muxus, which is one of the main things I'm worried about. I mean, We can still lose to Food Chain into Matron into Muxus, but, you know, that's a pretty specific sequence they'd need to have here. So yeah, again, I'd be surprised if they conceded here unless... Well, I guess it depends what's in their hand, right? If they don't have Food Chain or Matron... Oh, wow, opponent just keeps it up, so we got there. Nice.